Mr. John Sifton is the Asia Advocacy Director for Human Rights Watch and works on South and Southeast Asia. Previously, he was the director of One World Research, a public interest research and investigation firm. Before joining One World Research, Sifton spent 6 years at Human Rights Watch, first as a researcher in the Asia Division, focusing on Afghanistan and Pakistan, then as the senior researcher on terrorism and counterterrorism. Secondly, we have Mr. Ajit Sahi. He is a human rights and civil liberties activist and journalist from India with 3 decades of experience. He has campaigned extensively against a deliberate targeting by Indian police of innocent citizens in fake terror cases, as well as for the rights of India's marginalized social minorities, including the low-caste Dalits and tribal people. And finally, Mr. T. Kumar is the Amnesty International USA's International Advocacy Director. He has served as a human rights monitor around the world and was the director of several refugee camps and refugee ships. He also served as a consultant to the Quaker United Nations office and was a professor at the Washington College of Law. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming today to share your expertise with us. Your written statements will be made a part of the record. Because of the length of this hearing, we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes each, and then we'll do the questions and answers after that. And so at this point, the chair is pleased to recognize Mr. Sifton for his 5-minute summary of his testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify. This is a well-timed hearing. I think it's fitting and proper to hold a hearing today to coincide with the eve of the arrival of the Prime Minister and on the eve of his historic address. Holding this hearing sends a very clear message that while the United States values its improving relationship with India, it is concerned with India's human rights record, and it should be. The Indian government, of course, has every right to raise its own concerns with the United States human rights record. And speaking as a representative of an international human rights organization that works on over 90 countries worldwide, including on the United States itself, we encourage Prime Minister Modi to do just that, raise human rights issues that the United States has: excessive and abusive NSA surveillance practices, discriminatory and excessive use of lethal force in policing, whatever he wishes. But just as India should be raising its concerns with the United States, the U.S. has an important role to raise human rights issues in India. It's a false claim that some in India make that because India is a democracy and an ally, the United States has to remain silent about its record. Now, India has taken important strides in recent years, in particular with legal reform and with respect to the treatment of women, Dalits, and various vulnerable groups. There have been recent legislation in the areas of women's rights, LGBT rights, and the rights of disabled people and other vulnerable groups. But in many areas, the government and local authorities continue to fall short, both with respect to legal reforms and, more importantly, the implementation of legal reforms. Now, I've provided the committee with the written version of my testimony, which is now going live on Human Rights Watch's website. It focuses on several areas of concern. The main sections outline freedom of expression, which I believe all the members have alluded to already. The written submission discusses overly restrictive laws on sedition, criminal defamation, and other criminal provisions which can be and are used to stifle dissent. This is the Human Rights Watch report that was released the other week. It's called Stifling Dissent, and it outlines in terrible detail all of the cases over the last couple of years in which local and national government have used these laws to restrict journalists, cartoonists, and other members of civil society. So that's one issue I addressed in my written testimony. The second is restrictions on civil society. And I just want to bore down for a moment on this issue. The law that India has, the Foreign Contributions Regulation Act, is the problem here. And it is a problematic law which U.S. lawmakers should raise with Indian government officials as much as they can. This law is the law that is used to make life difficult for nonprofits and other charities inside of India. And I'm glad, by the way, that Senator Cardin raised this when he was there recently. It's a very problematic law that needs to be repealed or reformed. Third, violence against religious minorities. The written submission details an alarming rise in incidents of violence and harassment of religious minorities, in particular Muslims, but also Christians. There are also problems with forced conversions of Sikhs and lack of accountability for violence against Sikhs, both 30 years ago, but also violence against Muslims as recently as this decade. I note in my testimony that the issue is not merely one to address to the Indian government, but also to the ruling BJP government. Prime Minister Modi, besides being the Prime Minister of India, is also the leader of his party, and his party is an actor when it comes to restraining violence against religious minorities, and I urge people to understand that distinction. I raised caste issues in my written submission, ongoing failures by the government to address longstanding inequalities and injustices. And my written submission also discusses continuing concerns with violence against women, the LGBT community, as well as issues related to the military's operations in emergency areas. Now, as the committee is aware, India, like the United States, is a federal structure. So it's a little bit complicated to raise these issues with the national government and the prime minister. But the central government has too often used this as an excuse for its own inaction in addressing human rights concerns and failed to use its power and influence to compel local jurisdictions to protect human rights. So I urge members of Congress to not let that federalism issue stop us from raising human rights issues directly with the national government. The Modi government has failed to promptly condemn attacks against religious minorities. It's failed to call on state governments to investigate and prosecute those responsible for religious violence, some of whom are members and supporters of the BJP. And similarly, while state governments have been responsible for using and misusing problematic national laws, the Modi government has a record of defending those laws like the sedition law and the criminal defamation law. So I urge you to raise these issues directly with the national government, even if it's a local issue. Okay, in conclusion, progress on human rights in India will continue to falter unless the Modi administration takes better steps to ensure justice and accountability for all of its citizens, protect vulnerable communities, protect the free exchange of ideas and dissent. The lack of effective implementation of laws remains the persistent challenge. Government officials are not held accountable. Impunity persists for police and security personnel who are shielded by laws. So we urge members of Congress to press with the Indian government, prioritize these vital issues and raise them directly in interactions in the months and years ahead, but in particular tomorrow. Thank you.